Home and Away returned to Australia in February, putting it back as a soap opera that I could put in these rankings after Home and Away was not in my rankings, I believe, for December and January. Honestly, though, I was expecting Home and Away to come back into these rankings a little higher than even fourth, even though fourth is pretty high, because I have missed Home and Away. Back when I was recording these rankings with Home and Away in them, I used to talk about how Home and Away is a vibe, and I vibe with their over dramatic style. And it has returned well, but it's just that the top three soap operas actually put in a great month for February. I was back in January. I was worried about some of all the soap operas were kind of rough. So I thought Home and Away was going to return super high. Alas, maybe not quite as high as I thought, but 4 is still pretty high. But we're going to talk about some of the storylines, and I think the main reason as to why Home and Away is not in the top 3 is because, first of all, there wasn't a whole lot of storylines, and what we got from the storylines kind of actually dragged out a little too much, which for Home and Away is rare. A lot of these soap operas, I always talk about how the storylines are dragging for months and months, and I just want them to end. But Home and Away is not usually like that. But some of these stories in February kind of dragged on. The main story, and while it's still good, it definitely is a story that dragged on. So when we left off Home and Away in November, Mia and her ex were getting into an argument, and her ex had abusive tendencies, and their daughter Chloe ended up killing him, and then Mia took off with the body, and she was getting chased by police, and it was a whole ordeal. While Ari, Mia's fiance, I guess, was ended up taking the fall for Chloe. And that's kind of brought on the big story here where Chloe's feeling bad about all this because he's taking the fall for her, and her mother was about to marry him. But Mia's going along with it, and Ari's obviously going along with it because he's the one taking the fall for Chloe. Chloe's kind of writing in her journal, feeling really bad about all of this, and they have to destroy that evidence because Chloe's obviously admitting to the crime in her diary/journal. So it's a lot of Chloe blaming herself for everything that's happening, even though it's one of those soap opera stories where it's a little too plot driven, because it's clearly like she killed her father to kind of defend her mother. So telling that to the police would probably solve everything, but I guess there wouldn't be drama if it wasn't for Ari taking the fall, right? Ugh, excuse me, my allergies are killing me today. But we are going to move on to Ryder, who was last seen in November being buried alive because him and Theo were always like challenging each other to different things like this. Theo gets injured and he can't make it back to Ryder, who is buried alive and almost dies because of that. So after the aftermath of this, Ryder is obviously unburied and he ends up being okay, but it was a very close call, and Alf is very upset and blaming Theo, and Alf basically pushes Theo to be arrested, and that was a big cause of drama for Home and Away in February. This was probably one of the more dramatic storylines that I enjoyed. I mean, I enjoyed the whole Chloe aftermath, but that story was a little more low-key, whereas the story with Theo being arrested for what happened with Ryder was more in-your-face dramatic. Another story that is out of kind of nowhere is Logan and his mystery woman ex, Mauve, and she has PTSD, and they end up kissing, and she's coming between Logan and Mackenzie. This was probably the weakest story for the show in February. I think it's because the actor that plays Logan didn't want to get vaccinated. It's kind of like General Hospital. the same situation there. So I don't think Logan is long for the show because of the actor that portrays him, and Australia has really over the top mandates right now. And the other story was Jasmine and Cash, who declare their love for each other, make love and all that. But when it comes to Jasmine asking Cash to move in with him, he's not really for it because he's worried about abandoning his sister Felicity. And, you know, Felicity's been a main source of drama as of late in some of the months past that I've talked about. But overall, the show has been missed. I think another reason why I couldn't quite put it as high is because 3 of these storylines I mentioned all are kind of dealing with the same thing. And it's not a bad thing to deal with this because I think it can be a social issue for sure. But I think all 3 storylines kind of dealing with PTSD, Mauve and her PTSD, and Ryder has PTSD from being buried alive, and Chloe has PTSD from killing her father. It's kind of redundant though, and it's not like they're making it a point to make this the theme of the show. I just kind of feel like all 3 of these stories are just kind of happening to go this route at once. But overall, I enjoyed Home and Away in February. It's number 4 on my rankings. I'm glad it's back. It's one of my favorite in recent years. And it might be the last Australian soap opera standing. We'll talk about more on that when I get to Neighbours, which is next in my ranking.